Good morning, everyone. Welcome back. Today, in our talk, we have a very special guest again. This time is Margaret Parkin, a Suzuki teacher who lives now in Oxford. She's from Canada originally. And we're going to be discussing the benefits of review. So, welcome, Margaret. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being part of this 100 days of crazy practice. So today, we wanted to talk about review. I thought it would be nice to have a chat about how you see review and how do you see review can be incorporated in our practice and how to do it the best way, really, for us practicing every day.
So we were chatting about what review brings to our playing, and I think I really work to incorporate review into every lesson with every student in some capacity. And whether, for instance, in group class, I start every group class with the twinkle variations. Whatever the level of group class, we work on the twinkle variations and theme, and maybe we're thinking of refining some part of our posture, or refining a bow stroke, or refining where the bow is sitting. And I've just given away that I'm a violin and viola teacher, so I'll talk obviously from a string point of view, but within that part, for instance, of group class, we're really just focusing on one technical element of playing and doing that and being able to listen really carefully. And it's just something I've really been thinking about a lot, and what that will bring to pieces that are closer to the top level of the students, how that review and how that thought and listening, really deep listening to ourselves, contributes to musicality and the ease of playing things that are trickier.
Yeah, and exactly. And also, I guess, like you said, finding something that is that relates to what we're playing at the moment in some way or another. And if nothing else, I think one of the main things we wanna work on with the review is the sound, listening to the sound, like you're saying, improving it. That's what I tell my students too. Is like that's the main purpose of review, is improving your sound, improving your tone.
I've been amazed, when in my own playing, when I really think about how I'm setting my instrument up, when I really think about how the flow of my arm is working, or when I really think about releasing any tension that's in my arm, how different that will feel on the string, and feeling how the string works with the bow. And of course, I'm speaking from a teacher's point of view, where I am thinking very deeply and listening very deeply, but I really try and give that to students as well, that tool of careful and sensitive listening. I really think that was one of Dr. Suzuki's priorities, and that's developing that sensitivity to tone and making a beautiful sound. But what's most important to me is that students are able to have that facility, that really they play because they like the sound of the instrument. And even this morning, I was teaching a lesson first thing this morning to a very young viola student, and we were talking about how important it was that he really loved his tone, really loved the sound he was making. So he was working on twinkle variations and really thinking, for instance, about the placement of his bow on the string. And we were able to really refine that idea by using review pieces rather than simply focusing on his top piece.
Mm-hmm. Well, it sounds to me you're saying a lot about listening to your own tone, but also listening to your body while you're playing. Listening in a different way, listening to how it feels, or feeling your body while you play. And that's only possible when we're doing review, because when we're doing our top piece, it is possible, but there's so many more things going on in our heads, and there's so much complicated stuff.
So many more things, and that development of the pathway from the brain to the muscles, really only can be focused on when we're not always already thinking about what notes are coming next or what bowing is coming next. Again, speaking from a string perspective, what elements of the music are coming next, what's going to happen next. There isn't the same capacity to think about it to think about how the muscles are working or how the muscles are being programmed. And I'm often amazed in lessons where we step away from a top piece, we step away from a preview point, and we go back to something that is very well known by the student. And then I can give them one single element of playing to think about. For instance, if it's their left hand, thinking about playing on the very inside corners of their fingers, or if it's about their bow, thinking about the placement of the bow. And I'm able to give that to them, and they achieve it instantly away from the top piece. So one of the things I also talk to parents about is refining the practice point, what I call the practice point, or, refining it in a piece that the student knows very well.
Yeah. The other thing I like about the review is I can't remember who it was, talking about upgrading instead of reviewing. And it's just getting a piece, whatever piece it is, that you have played a long time ago and you still remember pretty well because you've been doing the review, and you're able to upgrade that piece to a different level. Because whenever you were playing that piece, you was just about being able to play it. Now you have gone, I don't know, whatever is a year, 2 years forward, you are much more advanced. And you're able to get all your knowledge and all your improvements, you can put them into that piece and you can upgrade it to a different level.
Absolutely. And I know in my studio, I'll talk to the students about the fact that they're all Book 10 students. They're refining Book 10 by reviewing the pieces in Book 1. But they are already all in Book 10. And they'll say, no, we're not. And I'll say, yes, you are. It's the same bow strokes. And I once heard a colleague say, do you know, violin's pretty easy. We put the bow on the string, we go down and up. That's what we do. Now, we may change how fast the bow is or how many notes are in the bow, but really we're just going down and up. And those down and up bow strokes are, for instance, in the Book 1 toolbox. So an activity we often do in my studio or in my group classes is we play a twinkle, but then the students have to stand like they have to play like they're in Book 10. Imagine how a Book 10 student would play this. And then at the end, I'll say, was that a Book 10 twinkle? And they'll say, no, it was only a Book 6 twinkle. So then we'll do it again. And what's really amazing to me is how much taller they stand, how much more upright they are when they think they're in Book 10. And I think that's one of the really magical things. It's one of the magical things we have about playing together when we're able to. And of course, like many teachers, I haven't had a group class live for a very long time. But one of the really magical things we have in that sound together is that capacity to upgrade, as you say, or refine, or allow our bodies to play freely.
And also, like you said, playing with the other kids is the joy of playing together with other kids. If you're able to play more than one piece, you have more chances to play with other children that have the same repertoire. And if you are, let's say, Book 5 or something, and you keep reviewing the other books before, you can just go and play all those pieces with everyone else that know those pieces, whether it's in your studio, whether it's in a workshop, like the national workshop coming up, or whether it is in another country. I mean, like you were a Suzuki child as well. I remember being a Suzuki child coming to Scotland for a international workshop. Suzuki was there, and I couldn't speak any English, and there were many teachers and students from all over the world, but we could all play together, and that was amazing. We could just put the violin on and just play together. So that's another benefit from doing review, able to play together.
Absolutely. And those pieces, for you and I as Suzuki children, I often say those pieces are the soundtrack of my life. They're the soundtrack of my childhood. I grew up listening to Dr. Suzuki on recording. and they are the fabric of my musical life. And there's such joy in that. And I think what you're saying about that capacity to come together, I think some of the most profound moments in my teaching life have been to listen to groups of children from all over, from all different places, come together and play. I once heard a teacher say, the retake in Song of the Wind is the same. It's the same in Spain or the UK or where I'm from in Canada. Every E string, we play the E and we retake and we land, and it's the same anywhere you go. And I really had never thought about it like that. But that music and those pieces, those review pieces, are our language. They're our common language, and we speak through them. So even if I'm in a room full of children that don't speak the same language that I do, my violin is my instrument, is the way I can communicate, and the pieces, this repertoire and those review pieces are the language that I'm using to communicate so many different elements of playing and of being human. Really, I don't even, I really view this repertoire and the instrument as tools for teaching about life, not just tools to teach about music. So I think the farther I go along in my Suzuki journey, and I by no means feel, I've even discovered a tiny fraction of what I need to know, but these are things that really carry me, and that I'm really fascinated in those connections too. Have you ever noticed that the pieces are all connected to one another? And even if no one's mentioned it before, I was teaching last night and playing a really advanced piece with a student, and suddenly something in what we were working on, I was like, oh, actually, this is exactly the same as book 2. It's exactly the same as, I forget what piece it was, but it was, again, just a new discovery about how cleverly this and thoughtfully this repertoire has been put together for us, that everything is connected, and not just by the bow strokes, but by the elements of each piece. So I love those discoveries as a teacher, and I love sharing them with my students so that they really understand why we're asking them, for instance, to play book 1 every week, or why we're asking them to play every piece they know.
I think the magical bit is when the student recognizes it themselves. Like, I know this, I've played this before. And they eventually find what other piece it was that was that same pattern or a similar technique or something. And they just like, wow, I know this already in a new piece.
Yeah. It's like, again, I'm speaking from a violin point of view, but it's like the Two Grenadiers. Have you ever noticed the Two Grenadiers is the same as the opening for the Mozart D major? It's the same bow stroke. It's just a little higher up in the left hand, but as that colleague once said, it's the same down and up bows. It's exactly the same tone. Or in the middle of the Mozart A major, there's a retake that's exactly the same as the one in Song of the Wind. And you suddenly, your body, that's the thing that I notice, is that when we point out those connections, our bodies remember how it felt to play in book 1, and suddenly everything just settles down, and then the more refined, the more advanced piece is feels more achievable because the muscle is remembering that it's done it before. So yes, as you said, I look forward to students making those discoveries and having that consciousness themselves.
And the more review they do, the more they will discover them, because they'll keep playing the pieces alongside the more advanced pieces, and they will be like, hey, wait a second, this is what I was playing just now, or what I was playing yesterday. And the more they do that, the brain is also getting those connections stronger. And like you said, they can ease into the new pieces.
And don't you feel that it helps it to feel less overwhelming as well if you're approaching something that's new? If you can start pulling it apart and think, oh, I've done this before. Okay, yeah. And having that ability to deconstruct, I suppose. I guess as our students grow and we're teaching them how to practice and how to decode. I call it decoding sometimes for my older students. We're teaching them how to do that independently. And if I always feel if I can help them to decode and step back into the review pieces they've done before, that again, that helps to build that understanding of how to begin tackling something that's much more, that's at the top of their repertoire.
Actually, I was going to ask you about that. In terms of putting review in our practice, how do you recommend is the best way to have review in a practice? Do you do it, how do you normally tell your students to do that?
When students are in book one, I really hope, when they're early in book one, I really hope they're playing every piece they know every day. And in my lessons, for, I'd say, the first half of book one, that's what we do in the lesson, is we just start and we play all the way through to the top piece. And because it's part of the lesson, then it's easier for the parent to guide the practice at home because it's a teaching priority. When students reach book two, for instance, and I have a student, I was having this exact conversation with a parent in my studio last week. Then what I suggest they do is just have a practice chart or have a system of playing through all the pieces. For instance, the whole of the book one, what I call the book one toolbox. So that's what book one is referred to for me. And that they just have a system of playing every piece within, for instance, the week. Because perhaps for very young students, playing all of book one every day, plus the new work, is, for most students, would feel fairly overwhelming. I mean, we'd love to think it was happening, but let's be honest, it's a little overwhelming. And I'm a parent who practices with my own child, so I understand it's overwhelming. So I have various review charts. Sometimes for that family, I suggested they just have all the pieces on the pieces of music written down in a pot and they just draw out. Because the other thing that parent was pointing out to me is that there are certain pieces her child will try and avoid to play because they don't like them as much as the others. But so that system can work very well. I have actually a review chart that has all the pieces listed from books 1 to 10. And Monday to Friday. Or Monday to Sunday, rather. And then the pieces are listed horizontally, and then you just look down the column and you play everything that's in the column for book. For Monday, for instance. I've done that. So last summer, when we were still all in lockdown, I did a daily review club online with my students. So I said, at 2 o'clock every afternoon, I'm going to be online practicing. I'm going to be doing my review online. And I just had that chart, and I just played every column online. It took about 45 minutes. And they could join in for the pieces they knew, and they could listen to the ones that they didn't know. And in a way that made it more accountable for me. I was staying accountable to my students, and I was polishing all the pieces, which was good for me.
For everybody.
It was good for me too. So, and then for my older students, who are busy and committed to lots of different activities, I'll set review pieces for group class, set review pieces for concerts, so that they have playing goals. So they have things that they know they have to refine for upcoming events or for upcoming classes. And I find that's most successful. And I take a really hard look at where everybody is in the repertoire and make sure that I'm deliberately choosing review pieces for everyone. So no one is coming to group, for instance, and playing their very top piece. They're all playing back a little bit. So those are just some ideas.
And when you're doing those, when you're playing through those review pieces, do you recommend that they play through it? I mean, depends on the level, I guess. I guess beginners is more like they just play through the pieces unless there's a mistake or there is something to work on specifically. But I guess when they go more advanced, they need to have more of a goal during the review, right?
Yeah. So sometimes I'll say, right, in your review, for instance, in lessons last week, in several of my lessons, we were really thinking about the tone of up bow strokes. So the contact at the top of the bow. So I assigned in those lessons specific pieces where it's there's time and space, for instance, like Judas Maccabeus, where you can really think about the contact and the way that the thumb balances the top of the bow. So I sometimes will give really specific things, a really specific point to refine in a review piece, particularly for the older ones. And since every lesson starts with review, every lesson starts with tonalization and review, however long or short that is. And then the practice point, the polishing point comes from that. And then we go on and we do new work. And I don't expect the polishing point to turn up in the new work. It's lovely if it does, but the truth is it probably won't. And I also am clear with the parent that that's okay.
And the other thing I find quite useful with review is, in the way that we're talking, is if the child has a working point, whatever it is, let's just say it's posture, just because it keeps coming back. If they can focus on the posture while they're doing the review, or they can focus on a specific part of the body, let's say the shoulder, that it might not be relaxed enough, while they do the review, that's the right time to keep working on that. So let's say, for example, this week, you've been told that you need to work on your posture or your bow hold or whatever it is. Use that as your focus point during your review. Whatever review you're doing, keep looking into it.
Exactly. Because as we said earlier, that's exactly the time when you can focus on it. Not when you're trying to also figure out how to play in, 58th position or lots of fast notes. It's not going to have the same awareness. And that's another element, there's a real element of awareness. And that's been one of my real teaching themes this year is awareness of sound, awareness of the body, awareness of balance in the feet. Particularly as we've been online a lot, because I think as fortunate as we are that we've been able to continue working, continue teaching, and continue being connected with one another, there are elements of, for instance, body balance that change when you're in front of a screen. So I've been very careful to focus on that and not just me watching it, but to develop an intrinsic awareness for every student so that they understand how it should feel to be properly balanced or properly relaxed or have the hand balanced. And they learn those tools to be able to do it themselves independently.
It's great that we can talk about review. It's just sometimes it's really not so easy for the children to understand why they have to do the review. We understand it because we can see it from a teacher's, with the teacher's hat on. But if you have to tell a student why do they have to review, what would be this thing you would tell them?
I tell them from a very practical point of view that review pieces allow them to remember 80% of a new piece. So whatever their new piece is, they've done 80% of it approximately. That's approximate. 80% of that before in something else. And there may be one or two new ideas in a piece, but everything else is based on review. So the more they review, the easier they're going to find the newest work. So that's from a really practical point of view. And we were speaking earlier about being Suzuki kids and going to group class and going to workshops and going to big events. And of course, everybody can play the same things. So that was kind of just fun. And it was the same for me as a child. We get together at an institute or a workshop or orchestra practice backstage where we used to have Fiocco Allegro races to see who could play the fastest. Or things like that. It was fun. It was fun. And it was the thing that we had in common. I had in common with my friends. I had in common with my musical friends. So I try to talk about that with students that, this is a language. It's a language like English or Spanish or French. It's a language that you learn and you absorb and is part of your life. And the review pieces are that language that allow you to go and be with other people who speak the same language as you.
And yeah, when you're doing to workshops and stuff like that, and you meet all these new people you never been with, and you might feel a bit shy, but you suddenly pick up the violin and you can or whatever instrument it is, and you can play with the other kids together. It's just like, wow, I don't know them, but it's like you've known them all the time because you have something in common, and that's the community. That Suzuki community is so large and so amazing.
Absolutely. And there's, as you say, there's just that instant connection, even if there's not a common spoken language. There's a common musical language. So, and I'm sure, and you'll be the same. I go to workshops in other places, and I watch children who may or may not know each other, but they're having a lot of fun. And I think that's the other thing that's really important to students, that when they go and they play together, or they go, they come to their lesson, that there's some element of fun and enjoyment. It's hard work. And, it's hard work to continually refine and review and polish things. It is. It's hard work for a student. It's hard work for the parents. It's hard work for the teachers. But I once heard a student describe it as hard fun. Because there's still a lot of satisfaction that comes from that, and joy that comes from that. And I know that from practicing, with my own child, that the look of satisfaction on his face when he plays a review piece really well, or something that he remembers learning that once was really difficult, and then he stands up and he'll again play it really beautifully and easily, and you can see on his face that kind of penny dropping, that oh yeah, I can do this. Oh, okay. This is something I'm good at. And that from a child point of view, a student point of view, I think is, again, really important. I often think of Ed Kreitman's book, The Beginning of Teaching from the Balance Point, where he talks about the teaching priorities, which I do follow, and that posture and tone are the top teaching priorities, just like breathing is a life priority for all of us. Pretty important one. But that good posture and good tone are like breath. And I think that's what continual review gives you that breath, and the freedom to express yourself easily.
Well, thank you for this chat. It's been really nice to chat with you. And we will review it, and we will continue to review.
Review.
Keep reviewing. And yeah, I hope to see you soon in reality, but if I don't, maybe at some point during the national workshop coming up.
Yeah, I hope so too. Thank you so much. Thank you. It's lovely to chat with you.